Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. I have a brand new guest. Her name is Attorney Nicole Suissa. She's obviously a lawyer. She sits on the boards. She's a volunteer for the fire service. She mentors college kids. She's giving a TEDx talk this year. And she overcame an incredibly adverse childhood to become the person that she is today and the mother that she is today. And now she's having it used against her in a court of law because she had the audacity to work hard and make it. Now, the judge is Emanuel Bertin, and he is clearly incensed by her mere existence and refusal to be abused or controlled or dominated in the system. And I welcome you to the show, Attorney Nicole. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much.
How did this all happen to you? You're just being so demonized in the system.
I am. It's been procedurally bizarre. This
Yes.
thing started in April of 2020, and right away it became apparent that there was a community that was working together. My daughter's father took me to custody court in the community that his family grew up in.
Hmm.
Uh, there were several conflicts of interest that were not disclosed to me until about 15 months into litigation. And those conflicts led to a full bench recusal. Every single judge in the county was
Wow.
affected somehow. Uh, After that bench recusal, Judge Bertin, who was a visiting senior judge from Montgomery County, was brought in. And that made it worse. At that point, I would have rather taken one of the judges that recused themselves.
Uh,
Uh, what was supposed to be a 3-day trial was stretched out to 12 days over the span of 8 or 9 months. And though it was 12 days, my entire case was rushed and put together in about 4 days. The rest of it was given over to my ex, who was invited for days on end to speculate about me, my life, my choices, my career, uh, and my marriage, which has since dissolved. So
mm,
it's been bizarre. The bizarre part being that there were a lot of factors that were given heavy weight and consideration that have absolutely nothing to do with the 16 factors of custody in Pennsylvania.
mm.
Things like my childhood homelessness, for example. At one point in the middle of my testimony, I was interrupted by Judge Bertin, and he very pointedly asked me, "Is your mother mental?" There had been no testimony to that effect. He had never met my mother. My mother was not a witness in the case, but he felt that was an appropriate question and that was an appropriate speculation to make, and repeated that speculation in his order. Other things like whether or not my mother was an immigrant from Puerto Rico, which is not a legal possibility, nor can a mother travel from Puerto Rico to New York in order to give birth in America, quote. Other things like his grave concern about my ex's inability to gain law licensure, and he still does not have a law license, and somehow that being tied to me, calling my ex's family wholesome and my family dysfunctional, despite the fact that both families are indeed quite dysfunctional.
Hmm.
Uh, there were a lot of things given weight and concern, and a lot of inappropriate questions raised on Judge Bertin's part, including questions about my sex life, questions about my childhood, questions about how long it took my daughter's father to go on a first date with me and then sleep with me, questions about why I would bother filing an abuse report if I didn't have black eyes and a broken back, and that was petty, and how could I risk my ex's career that way?
Mm.
It became very clear to me that I was dealing with a misogynistic courtroom.
Hmm. And also a racist courtroom.
Indeed. Yes. Yes, very much so.
Uh,
Unfortunately.
you know, I know you had told me this is in the appellate court now. So all you're doing is sitting around waiting for that outcome.
Right. Right now, I'm bound by the order that came out, which gives me even less time with my daughter than I've had through this process. I now see her 4 days out of every month. It's every other weekend. It's 4 days out of every month. For a child that I had on a primary and almost full-time basis for the first 4.5 years of her life. And now we've been flipped to this schedule. She's not receiving court-ordered counseling because her father's been in contempt of that order for almost a year. Nobody's done anything about it. She is showing and manifesting physiological conditions of her stress and anxiety. She is in a school that is subpar to the schools that are in my area, and losing out on important things like Hebrew lessons and her Jewish studies. We're Jewish. We're part of a congregation. All the Jewish holidays were stripped from the order. And when that was brought up in my appellate brief, or rather my concise statement of matters complained of prior to my brief, Judge Bertin very quickly reversed it in a haphazard way by saying one or two sentences of mother gets all major holidays, with no real provisions of how that's going to occur, right? The Catholic holidays that we're bound to have provisions and conditions. There are odd years, even years. There's a time to pick up and a time to drop off. If there's a Catholic holiday that happens to fall on my weekend, he still gets the holiday. I lose out on my weekend. No such provisions were described in his very quick half-breathed reversal in giving me Jewish holidays. Moreover, I found it peculiar that a judge who seemed to know very little about my religion, he met the cantor of my congregation and called him, quote, the man that sings. And after being told by the child herself that she is Jewish and that she identifies as Jewish, I found it peculiar, with having not heard any evidence or testimony or having anything on the record to tell him what major Jewish holidays are, that he would simply say all major Jewish holidays to mother. What does that mean exactly? And it's odd to me that someone who doesn't practice my religion would even be able to dictate to me what my major holidays are to celebrate with my child, who is also Jewish.
You would think he would have, I guess the appropriate thing for him to do would have said in court, what are your holidays and what are the dates, so we can put this in the order to make everything crystal clear.
No such questions were asked. He did not care. And when I proposed an order, what's odd to me is that in the order I proposed at the conclusion of trial, I actually gave respective holidays to both parents. My ex does not practice any particular religion, but I know his family practices Catholicism. So I handed over all the Catholic holidays with no protest. I gave them over. No, please give him the Catholic holidays, all of them. Easter, Christmas, whatever they are, anything that isn't considered a secular US holiday. And to the extent, I even went this far, to the extent that Catholic holidays and Jewish holidays conflict, which in some years they do. For example, this year they will for Hanukkah and Christmas. To the extent that they do conflict, I still gave him priority because my logic was Jewish holidays are longer most of the time. Passover is 4 nights. There's 4 major nights of Passover. There's 4 Seders. Easter's 2 days, right? Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday. Christmas is 1 day, and if you count Christmas Eve, maybe 2 days, right? So usually when they run concurrent, the Jewish holidays are longer. So in trying not to be adversarial, in trying to acknowledge that this child has 2 co-parents, I said, please give each parent their respective set of holidays, and give dad priority when they are concurrent, as long as mom gets the opportunity to then finish the remainder of her holiday with the child. I don't know what he ever did with that proposal. It was a written proposal. It was a written brief. It was very evident he may not have read it, because it seemed like a copy and paste job of everything dad asked for, except for the fact that he took away an extra weekend unilaterally.
These aren't even legitimate courtrooms. These family courtrooms, they're illegitimate. They're, people call them kangaroo courts.
That's about right.
They also say that the judges that usually run these courtrooms are the lowest of the low. Judge Judy had called them some type of name. I can't remember what she said, but it wasn't, you know, I don't know what to say.
There was
But you can look it
Judge
up on
Judy, I
YouTube.
can imagine.
Yeah, idiots. I don't know what she called them, but they're the lowest of the low because, some of these judges are in there for like 14, 15 years. They can't advance. Why are these judges not advancing out of family court? So maybe they're angry at everybody. Maybe they're out to get these parents. And even like you're successful there. I've noticed there's this trend that some these judges, not all of them, some of them are going after, your middle to upper class individuals and making them pay. I don't, it's just something that I'm seeing or, hearing about from people that call me up.
It was odd to sit in that courtroom because of the procedural abnormalities anyway.
Mhm,
But Judge Bertin did most of the questioning. About 90% of the direct and cross examinations were done directly by the judge, which anyone in the legal profession and some people who are not in the legal profession know that that's a little bit odd, that that's not how it works. The lawyers are supposed to ask the questions, and the
mhm,
judges are supposed to call balls and strikes. He wanted to be judge and attorney, and
mhm.
at one point conducted such an extensive cross-examination that opposing counsel, when he was given back the mic, said, "Oh, I don't have anything further, Judge. Thank you for such a thorough cross. Thank you for such a thorough cross."
Oh,
Right?
God.
Right? What was bizarre was to sit there in the witness stand and have this judge yell at me and say, "Well, you got to make your career. You became a lawyer. You make the salary. He didn't do that. He didn't get to do that, and you have no compassion for him." Look, nobody disputes that I got the guy into law school. Nobody disputes that I helped him through law school. Nobody disputes that I drove the child 5 hours to attend his law school graduation. None of that was disputed. What is interesting is that he was given not only an opportunity, but an invitation to lay his successes and failures at my feet as though they were my responsibility.
Mhm.
As a woman, as a lawyer, as a mother, I have never been given such an opportunity. I had to have a C-section just to take the bar exam. Right. So it's interesting that all the men in the room can be angry at the one woman in the room because the other man in the room is not as successful. Right.
Mhm.
My ex is older than me. My ex had more resources than I did. My ex had, two parents and a house. He's never been homeless. He's never been, in extreme poverty. He's had support all along the way, and now he's incredibly fortunate to have an incredible child that he really didn't even want.
Mhm,
This is
mhm.
the same guy that dropped me off at an abortion clinic and then drove away 2 hours from home and left me stranded because he did not want this child. So it's incredibly infuriating to me as a woman to sit here and have, some judge who's old enough to be my grandfather and therefore not of the understanding of what it takes for a woman to get as far as I've gotten, yell at me, not because I did anything particularly wrong, but yell at me because he didn't make it as far.
Mhm.
Right? This is supposed to be a pick yourself up by your bootstrap
Right,
country, not right.
right.
And then do it, and he's upset that I didn't pick up his bootstraps right along with me. That is something I just don't understand. There's a lack of personal accountability there that
Yeah,
everyone is giving him license for.
and, his relatives are saying that they tried to talk you out of this alleged abortion that you did
Hogwash,
not even want.
hogwash.
Yes.
I, I mean, his relatives didn't even know about the pregnancy. I don't understand how they could talk me out of a pregnancy or abortion they didn't know about. Right.
Yeah, they all
So,
get involved. Yes.
right. Yeah. The manipulation of the truth is wild to me.
Mhm,
Um, Something I learned too late in this case, in this matter. Uh, and that's because of, being in the profession, I have a lot of faith in process.
mhm.
I have faith in the law and the legal system. I'm in it, right? So if I don't have faith in it, that really would make me question my life decisions, right? I walked in here faithful about how this would turn out. I thought it would turn out by the book.
Mm-hmm.
On day one, on our very first conference, I have a court master, Lisa Tressler, telling me in no uncertain terms on an off the record conference, which by the way, we should not be doing off the record conferences, with our attorneys on the phone, I have the judge's ear and I can see to it that you get even less time with your daughter. You better agree to this interim schedule. So day one, I'm being bullied by some court master who is telling me she has the judge's ear, but then simultaneously telling me she doesn't have the purview to make orders. Well, if you have the judge's ear, that's fine. I'll take the other ear. Give me the other ear. Right.
Right.
And already, I'm being told that I'm too aggressive. I am litigious. I am this, that, and the third. I'm the defendant in the case.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't bring this matter to court. I raised that kid for 4.5 years by myself without ever going for child support or custody or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I managed to co-parent, right? Mm-hmm. The minute that my ex didn't get what he wanted, which was, by the way, a pretty inappropriate ask, that's the minute we ended up in court. And I have this court master who I don't know from Adam bullying me about how she has the judge's ear and she can see to it that I don't see my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
It made no sense at the time. It made sense 15 months later when we learned that this court master is indeed my ex's attorney's client and that he did her custody case and that the co-parental counselor that we were quote unquote appointed, really by request of opposing counsel, was the expert witness in their case all those years ago, and that they have been working together ever since, and that her husband is a current client of the same attorney. So they have this long-standing fraternal network.
Mm-hmm.
And she's telling me she has the judge's ear because indeed she was the president, judge's extern, intern, clerk, whatever you want to call it. They have all of this history together. 15 months into the case, after all this damage has been done, all these adverse decisions have been made, she gets pulled off my case as well as about a dozen others, and the entire court recuses itself because when it stinks, it stinks.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention his aunt works for the previous president judge. So really, this entire case had no business being in this county for the amount of conflicts of interest that exist. Mm-hmm. That everybody was going to keep mum about because they thought I would go away. Right? As soon as I started making noise and as soon as it became apparent to them that this wasn't going to be a quick settled out matter, and there were multiple attempts by the court master, by Judge Roscioli, by other people off the record every single time, they never put this on record, which I think is incredibly telling. Mm-hmm. Multiple attempts to get me to settle and be quiet and acquiesce and go away. And as soon as they figured out that wasn't happening, everybody recused themselves and jumped ship.
So when they all recused themselves and left, what did you do? You filed for an appeal then?
No, and procedurally that wouldn't be possible. No, I waited and said, okay, well, maybe this will turn the tides because, at this point, there are things happening that I didn't understand why they were happening. Mm-hmm. I petitioned for a custody evaluation, denied. I petitioned for a motion for reconsideration, denied. I petitioned to have the child homeschooled because we were at the start of the pandemic and nobody knew what was going on. He wanted to send the child to school because it's inconvenient to his schedule to have the child homeschooled, denied. Everything I was doing, every maneuver I was trying to make to get this to make sense wasn't happening. And then they recused themselves when, stuff hit the fan and it looked as improper as it is. And so at that point, I waited for whoever this new messiah of a judge was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. We waited patiently for this new judge. The new judge came in, took a few months to start the trial, and it just went from bad to bizarre. Mm-hmm. This procedure was, I can't think of any other way to describe it. My attorney was very clear in telling me he's never seen anything like it in all of his years practice. I- I'm hard pressed to find an attorney who's seen a trial run like this.
Mhm.
I can't imagine asking two men on the stand how long it had been from their first date with mother to the first time they had sex with her. One of those men being a man I married.
Mhm.
Why would you ask my husband that kind of a question? Why? What relevance does that bear on the custody and permanency and stability of this child?
Mhm.
Paternity is not at question, sexual misconduct is not at question, to other than to paint a scarlet letter on precisely one party. What is the purpose of a question like that? And then when both men, actually, surprisingly enough, both men attempted to take the high road, neither one wanted to answer the question. Both of them looked shocked.
Mhm.
They were compelled to answer the question. So bad to bizarre. That is the way that I can describe it. This process started off bad and it just went to bizarre.
Mhm.
There are things that happened in this case that, as a practicing attorney, I really don't think I'll ever see again. I hope not. I don't think that I'll see this again. I know that there are really bad cases out there that I've been reading about, from other parents and other mothers. And I think that reading through my transcript, which is thousands of pages long, that this is right up there.
Mhm.
To tell a woman that she should have waited for black eyes or a broken back to file an abuse report is not the direction we want to be going in this country. If you're being chased out of a house with your child in tow and things are being thrown at you and neither party disputes that chronology of events, and you decided to tell the police about it because you wanted it documented,
Mhm.
you do that without any sort of blowback from a judge who thinks that women need to be hit in order to file a report. And then for him to brag about how many PFAs he's done, I think was more scary than anything. According to him, he's done thousands of PFAs. I can't imagine how many women he's put at risk with that sort of mentality. And I told him that. I said, look, if you're waiting for black eyes and a broken back, you've waited too long.
Mhm.
Waited too long. We're not talking about a police report anymore. You're talking about an obituary.
Yeah.
I'm not letting that guy write my obituary. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And I'm not letting my daughter normalize that sort of behavior from her father or any man for that matter.
Mhm.
Right? There's no hitting of the child. There's no chasing her mother out of the house. There's no yelling. No, it's not acceptable behavior.
Mhm.
And my documenting it with police made it very clear that that is not acceptable behavior. And this judge is upset at me for that. Well, his response was to strike those statements from the record. Strike them as you may. That doesn't make any of them untrue.
Yeah, how old is he, if I might ask?
But Judge Bertin,
Mhm. Mhm.
78, and it shows.
Oh, yeah. You know, I had looked up the age for judges in Pennsylvania. I thought it was 75, or is it 70? Now I can't remember.
No, it's actually it's pretty good. You're close to spot on. So at 70, they retire them from the
Ugh.
lower court, and then you gain senior status, and they take cases on an as needed basis. A lot of the time, there's a lot of overflow. He doesn't have as full a docket as a full-time lower court judge would have, but he takes cases ad hoc as needed. So this is one of those cases that he got as a senior judge. But then once he turned 78, he's almost 78. I think he'll be 78 next month, or he said something like that. Once he turns 78, though, then he's off. So by December, he's completely off the court. There's no more, not senior status, not full-time, nothing. He's not a judge anymore. Based on the way this went, I think that perhaps they should look at retiring judges sooner.
Like at 65, like
Yeah,
the normal
like
retirement
normal,
age.
yeah, sooner. I think that they need to retrain judges on domestic violence issues, on abuse matters, on how abuse starts. If we're waiting for a woman to get the crap beat out of her, why does it have to get to that?
Mhm.
And when I went to CYS because he was hitting my child. I wasn't there. It's in his house. He's telling me that it's not my business what goes on in his house and that there's nothing I can do about it. My daughter is writing in a journal that she doesn't want to live with her father because he hits her.
Mm-hmm.
It was concerning. She came home with a bruise. It was concerning. So I called CYS. And though they didn't dispute what happened, they acknowledged that yes, her father likely hit her. He didn't cause severe bodily harm, and corporal punishment is legal in Pennsylvania, so that there was nothing they can do. They're going to keep the file open for a year in case there's any other complaints. But because he didn't cause her severe bodily harm, there's nothing we can do. What parent in their right mind is going to wait for severe bodily harm on their child
Mm-hmm.
to make a report or remove that child from the house? Why? Why do we have to wait for such extremes? So I really do think that if we're going to pretend to do families and women and children any kind of justice,
mm-hmm.
we should be looking at problems as soon as they start. There should be some education or re-education on partner abuse. There should be education on talking to children and how children should be addressed. This is not a baby. This is a child that is very eloquent, years advanced of her academic age, and able to explain to you what happened if you ask her.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she was asked a bunch of leading questions in a 1-hour interview that, looked like they were sitting at some sort of Disney themed whatever, and no serious questions were posed to this child. None. And not only that, but her parents were not in the room. Only the attorneys, only one of which she's met before, because her father's attorney removed her from the house during her CYS interview, so she knew who he was, are in the room with her while she's talking to this judge who is asking her leading questions about how great her father is. Here she is telling this judge, I'm Jewish like my mom. And the judge says to her, well, your father's Catholic. It's okay to be Catholic too, right? No, it's not actually. Mm-hmm. Right? Especially if the child is telling you directly what she is.
Right.
So there should be some re-education on acknowledging children as humans, acknowledging children as something other than property, acknowledging children as autonomous beings with opinions and feelings and outlook, and talking to them in that manner, in that form. The thought that you shouldn't speak to children about the adversity that they're going through with the family unit is naive, and it's not even for them. It's not for their benefit. It became very clear to me when I had a co-parenting counselor telling me to lie to my daughter about what was going on because she shouldn't feel any adversity toward her father, that we're not approaching this the right way as parents. We're not. The idea that if you lie to your children, they won't get a sense of what's going on is a misguided idea. My daughter knows exactly that what's happening. She's concerned about what's happening. She doesn't understand why she has to be physically ripped off of me every Sunday in order to be put into her father's car. And she asks questions like, Mom, why can't I stay here? Why can't you hide me? Why can't you tell him I'm not going? Why can't you hold me here? I don't want to go. And I'm supposed to, according to this co-parenting counselor, who is pretty much a paid participant by opposing counsel, I am supposed to then turn around to my little girl and tell her, this is what mommy and daddy wanted. This is what we're okay with this. Everything's fine. Mommy and daddy agree on this. I'm sorry, I can't. It's a no. I understand the idea of telling her too much. I understand the idea of softening the things that you tell a child of that age. I understand, the idea of really not talking about it unless she asks and then having a conversation. I do not understand the idea of outwardly lying to a child who is expressing concerns about the family outlook.
Yeah, I never lied to my kids. What I would hear from the other side is that, well, the judge is the one making the decision, so he would take the accountability off himself. He would place it onto the judge and say, well, the judge is doing this, not me. That's what I was getting. I don't know if you're getting that too. I hear this from other parents as well, so I just wonder.
No, he doesn't. My ex doesn't talk to my daughter about things at all. And in fact, there are times that she'll ask him a question and she gets scorned for even asking. So the trust factor isn't really there for her, which makes things confusing. Even simple things like language, right? Simple parental difference in methodologies between him and me. You know, we went through the whole bad word discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Children between the ages of, 3 and 8 are really developing their command for language, and really don't understand the concept of bad words or why they're bad. Oftentimes they'll repeat something they heard on TV or something they heard an adult say that may not have been a nice thing, and they'll repeat it out loud, and then they'll get in trouble for repeating it, but they don't understand why that was a bad thing, especially if they heard it somewhere. And that was, something as simple as that, as silly as that, became a big fight between my ex and I, because she was getting in trouble for saying things like Jesus Christ or damn, or, things that I wouldn't consider curse words. But more importantly than that, in order to help her with her command of language, you have to really help her understand why words are good or bad. And if there are bad words and you can't say them, then what are the better words that you can say that reflect the same sentiment that the bad words are used for, right? So at 5 and 6 years old, I gave my daughter an academic word, a high up vocabulary word for every single 4-letter explicit word you can think of. Every single one, right? So, the S word became excrement. The F word became fornicate. The A word became anus. They're better words, right? These bad words are crude, and children should not be saying them. And that's a rude way of saying something. These are vocabulary words that you can't get in trouble for saying because they are in the dictionary. They're not bad words. Nobody's going to bleep you out for saying them. There's always a better word. And that became a game. And I told her, I said, you know what? When you're around mama, just around mama, you could use the curse word only if you know a better word. If you don't know a better word, you have no business using the bad word, because people who only know bad words are people who aren't eloquent. And when you aren't eloquent, people tend to think you're stupid. Are you stupid? No, I'm not stupid. Exactly. So you need to know the better words, right? Something as simple as that, conversations like that, he doesn't have. Instead, if she says something, if she repeats something she heard from a Broadway show like Hamilton, she loves Hamilton, but Hamilton does have some spicy words in it. She'll repeat the songs she got yelled at and couldn't understand why she was getting yelled. Right? So there's this oversight of children as being these beings that are supposed to simply do as you say, do as told. Right. And then later on, everybody wonders why they have no analytical skills as young adults. How do you, at what point do you expect a child who's been yelled at for asking a question to evolve? When does that happen? What is that metamorphosis? That's not a thing if that child isn't taught to question, if that child isn't taught to observe, to analyze, to think. And my biggest concern for my daughter, particularly as a young girl, is that she's going to be left in a town with a set of people who just don't think that way, and who I'm sure they mean the best for her and they love her. I don't doubt that her family loves her. But there are things that I'd love for her that they can't give her. There's an education I want for her that they can't give her. There's a cultural education I want for her that they can't give her. Since the order, her Hebrew classes have been interrupted. Her language studies have been interrupted. I have not been able to initiate her on the music classes I wanted. We have a whole baby grand piano in the house that I wanted her to start learning on. Our travels have been interrupted. We travel internationally every year. We used to before the pandemic. And now, now I can't see her at all. There are things that I wanted for her as a young woman that are now in jeopardy. She's just not going to get them.
And also this makeup time with these holidays, you know, you've given him, such leeway with the holidays, and then when you miss out, he's not even offering you any makeup time. You
Yeah.
know, why is this happening when, um, the good fit parent is doing everything they can to, cooperate and, like you said, not litigate or whatever, and then they just walk all over you.
No kidding.
And
It,
I said that to my lawyer. I said, "How come they're playing dirty?" And my lawyer said, "Well, we take the high road. It's like we're not this isn't getting us anywhere. It's not getting us anywhere."
that really does sound like a conversation I've had many a time with my attorney. At one point, I think I said something along the lines of, "Oh, we need to start cracking bottles and hitting people because this is ridiculous."
Right? Right? Yep.
Yeah, it really did seem like they were just pulling all of these and the gaslighting that was crazy.
Oh,
That's the
yes.
crazy. You will literally start to feel insane
Mhm,
because the amount of gaslighting that goes into a pleading is wild. Things
mhm,
that they were doing, and then they'll suddenly turn it around and claim you're doing them. Um, it was insane.
mhm.
It makes you feel like you're crazy. It does all the time. And my attorney was like, well, just build a record of it. Just build a record of it. Just build a record of it. You have to build a record of it. And all the while, you're passing the time and taking the hits just
Mhm.
to build a record. I'm thankful for it because now he's right. I have a hell of a record to show the appellate court. Uh, but it's maddening
Uh-huh.
when you're a parent who, his focus is his ego
Mm.
and his quote, his legal interests, which he actually testified to. He didn't want to send her to therapy because he needed to protect his legal interests. That was his reasoning.
Oh,
And
no.
he didn't deny it. That's what's crazy. He didn't deny it. Um, he put her on a bus where they were not qualified to administer her EpiPen, and she was expected to self-administer starting at age 5.
Oh,
And he
no.
put her on that bus because it was convenient to him. It was convenient to his work schedule, right? So one of us, our entire focus is the child, no matter how hard and inconvenient it's been. And parenting, as you might know, is a very inconvenient sport.
Mhm,
Uh, and one of us is just focused on himself, and he has been from the date of inception of this child. When we found out we were pregnant, granted, she was unintended. My daughter was, a very unexpected thing. We were not like a married couple waiting for a baby, not at all. We weren't married. We were boyfriend and girlfriend. We were casually dating. I was in law school. Um, and I was pregnant.
mhm.
And I told him that I was pregnant. And the first words out of his mouth at that point was, "You can't have this baby. I have to go to law school." The guy couldn't crack an LSAT at that time.
Mm,
He was getting 140s on the LSAT, but he had these dreams of going to law school then.
mm,
And I couldn't have a baby because he had to go to law school. There was no discussion. There was no question. There was no, what do you think? What do I think? What would work out best for you, me, and this child? None of that. So one of us has this kid in big picture,
mhm,
and the other one of us, by action, clearly doesn't.
mhm,
It's it is maddening to me that all of the efforts of one parent, though acknowledged by most of the people, including the expert witness co-parenting counselor,
mhm,
go ignored,
mhm,
in favor of the other parent. It's maddening.
mhm,
And what I should have done was take him to court immediately.
mhm,
Soon as that child was born, knowing we weren't going to get married, A, she should have gotten my name, not his.
mhm,
B, I should have taken him to court for custody and support, and that should have been the end of it.
mhm,
Oftentimes, good parents, cooperative parents,
mhm,
people that have, ideals and principles of what they want this to be for the benefit of the child, oftentimes they get de-incentivized.
mhm,
I am regretful wholeheartedly that I was as cooperative as I was,
mhm,
because really all that led to was them taking my daughter from me. I'm regretful. Everything he's done, all these, improper acts on his behalf, and his attorney and the court master and all these different people in that community treating me like a foreigner, everything that they did seems to have gone rewarded.
mhm,
And, I now have a kid who cries on the phone about how she wants to go home.
mhm,
So it's going to be very hard for me when she's older to explain to her, you know, mommy did things because mommy thought that they were the right things to do
Mhm.
to help you have a father, all for your father to turn around and destroy our relationship.
Mhm. I think a lot of people make this mistake. I did the same thing. You try to co-parent, sorry, real well, and then that relationship deteriorates because of we'll say a third party or whatever, or it just deteriorates, even though you've tried to, you've cooperated and done the right mature thing, and then it gets used against you when you're hauled into court. And I agree with you. Um, when these things happen, we should have gone right in there and laid down the instruction. And I didn't want to say lay down the law, but um, borders. We should have,
Boundaries. Yes.
boundaries. Thank you.
Boundaries.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've said that many a time. I really did give him and his family a lot of deference
Mhm,
because I grew up without a father
mhm,
from age 11 onward. I grew up without a father. And understanding that void in my life and knowing that I was going to have a daughter of all things, uh, I understood that right away. And I did not want that cycle to repeat itself.
mhm,
We are mostly a family of single mothers in my family.
mhm,
And my cousins and I all understand what it is to not have that paternal figure. And that's a hard thing. And so I thought, okay, look, the ideal for me, was obviously to be married and raise a child together.
mhm.
Granted, he wasn't first draft pick
Uh,
for who I wanted fathering my children, right? But it happened. It is what it is. Uh, I wanted to be married because I thought, again, that was the right thing to do and be. He did not. Okay. The next best thing after that would be for us to be friends
mhm,
and to co-parent. And that's what I thought we were doing.
mhm,
Um, he let his, you know, romantic scorn
mhm,
get in the way for 3 years of raising her. Right. I was done with the romantic relationship piece of it. But nonetheless, we did family days. I arranged for family photos twice a year. I would go to his mother's house. I would deliver the child to his mother's house. I would spend weekends. Like I was trying, to be as friendly and amicable as I could be so that she remembered times with mom and dad, even though mom and dad didn't live in the same place.
mhm,
He always took that as an invitation for something more. And we had to have that conversation repeatedly. In fact, according to his mother's testimony, he never told his parents we broke up.
mhm.
So this whole time, his family is under the impression that we're romantically involved, even though we live 8 states apart.
Oh,
And when they found out that I was dating, I was confronted. And I was very confused about this because I was confronted 2 years after our breakup. I decided to start. That's how long it took me to start dating.
mhm,
I decided I was young. I was a mom. I figured out the whole working mom thing. I wanted to start dating again. And I did. Nobody met my daughter. There was, I didn't involve her in my dating life until I married somebody. Um, and his mother was very upset and at one point demanded that I hand over my child because I was dating.
ah,
Yeah. Oh, if you don't want her, I want to say, well, no. That has
oh,
nothing to do with not wanting her. I can have a dating life and have a child. You have
mhm,
one,
mhm,
right? So I mean, you're dating somebody who's within 4 years of your son's age. You understand,
mhm.
lady, right? And so
Yeah.
so clearly, there's the issue was that she expected that I was going to be her son's partner, and it offended her that I chose otherwise
Mhm,
after that relationship dissolved. And I told her exactly why that was. In fact, I said, look, your son was abusive
mhm,
and he wasn't nice about having this baby or anything else. And her response to me was, well, that's what we do as mothers. My husband was abusive too, and I took it. Well, that's you.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
you. This is a new age, a new generation of women. We're a
mhm.
little more modern. Thank you.
Right.
And thankfully, we don't do the things and we don't tolerate or accept the things that our mothers felt they had to accept, that they were obligated to accept. There are women out there from generations past that perhaps felt they didn't have any other choice.
Mhm,
Thankfully, my generation of women and hopefully the generations after don't feel that way. It's important to me. The reason, I know a lot of people say that they stayed for the kids. A lot
mhm,
of people say that they stayed in unhappy relationships or even abusive relationships because they wanted their children to see them together.
mhm,
I understand that thought completely. I had a mother like that until my father eventually left. Had he not left, I don't think she would have. There are
mhm,
plenty of families that are built that way. Um, and I sympathize with those families. That said, I've been very fortunate. I've managed to obtain an education. I've managed to obtain an independent income of my own that doesn't rely on a partner or anyone else.
mhm,
And that really moved me to thinking about that whole dynamic very differently than perhaps my mother or my ex's mother or even our grandmothers might have thought about it. My whole thing was, I have a daughter, which, yeah, I think if it was a son, I may have thought of this differently, but the fact that it was a daughter made it so much more compelling to me. I have a girl who's going to grow up to be a young woman.
mhm,
I do not want my girl to believe that because she has a child, she can no longer maneuver in her life. She no longer has options or choices.
mhm,
And that, she, by watching everything I do, that's her first and primary example of what to do,
mhm,
right? In the way that watching everything her father does is her first and primary example of how men should behave with her, right? Kids do normalize these things and they take a page out of their parents' playbook. And the ones that move far and away from their parents' behaviors are the ones that really worked at it.
mhm,
Otherwise, you're relegated to whatever the heck it is your parents were doing because you don't know any better. You don't know any different. I did not want my daughter to see me in a relationship that was abusive or a relationship where I was belittled or a relationship where I wasn't fulfilling my potential or a relationship where I was utterly unhappy.
mhm,
And that's the relationship I had with her father.
mhm.
I did not think it was healthy for her to live in a house like that with those kind of dynamics between her parents. Instead, I'd rather that my ideal, which clearly is not turning out the way I thought. Okay,
Mhm,
so take
mhm,
it for what it's worth because it ain't working out. My ideal was that her parents are apart, separate, but happy.
mhm,
And they're both doing their thing. Her mother's a lawyer, her father's gonna be a lawyer one day.
mhm,
They're both, they found people that are better suited to them. Maybe my daughter would have step parents on both sides. Maybe she'd get siblings on one or both sides. Um, and she'd have two separate households that love her like crazy, and she can go to either one, and she'd feel comfortable at either one. And her parents, though they didn't love each other,
mhm,
they loved her, and she was the main focus. And they were able to set aside whatever acrimony or animosity they had for her benefit. And then eventually, as she got older, we would have to deal with each other less and less because
right.
she would then be empowered to manage her own parental relationships.
Mhm,
That was the ideal, right? That is what I thought. That's what I was working toward. That's what I wanted. And the minute I started dating,
mhm,
um, that all went haywire because he took great issue with my dating. I mean, great issue. He was sending me lingerie. He was sending me inappropriate things. He was going through my drawers if I gave him the key to drop my daughter off. He was sending me love letters at all times. He was calling me every hour of the night to make sure I wasn't lying next to somebody. I mean, it was a lot.
yeah.
Touching me inappropriately despite me asking him not to. He was telling his friends at school that we were together. I mean, a lot. And I kind of just turned a cheek because we had a daughter to raise.
Mhm,
And I would just alter my own behaviors. Okay, I won't come inside the next time I drop her off. Okay, maybe we'll meet at a diner in a public place. Okay, I'll put the letters away. Okay. I definitely won't be giving him a key next time. You
Right.
know, right? Little things like that. And sure, it came with fights and a lot of ugly words because I would just lose my patience with him.
Mhm.
But when I was dating and eventually when I got married, that is when all of this came off kilter.
Mm.
And that's just unfair. And I've heard this being very common,
Mhm.
especially when it's the woman who decides to date or marry. And I think that that's just another method of control. It's a way of controlling her.
Mhm.
Yeah, how dare she find someone else? How dare she decide that she's going to take command of her life outside of what we wanted with and for her?
Mhm.
And again, raising a daughter who I hope has all the autonomy she's due, I don't want her taking that example. I don't want her to fear her father's emotions or fear making anybody mad and then not making the choices she would have liked to make for herself out of fear of upsetting someone else.
Yeah, it's a common pattern when the other parent moves on and gets married, then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
And that's, when these people find themselves in courtrooms when they had been co-parenting decently or halfways decently. It's, when you're dealing with a personality disorder, it's just never gonna go right or well.
Yeah, I learned that one really late.
Me too. Me
I
too,
learned that
and
one
I think
really late.
a lot of people, I mean, and this is why, we're here to tell our story so we can warn others, because when you start dating someone, even if you've dated them 8 months, their true colors still haven't come out yet. You just never know when they're gonna come out.
Yeah, yeah. It's upsetting
Mhm.
because he's being given the halo treatment, and I can't understand why.
No.
There are over 10 pages in the transcript of me detailing with chronology and details of how our relationship went and all of the different instances of abuse and how they kind of worked their way up to where we ended up. And somehow in this 71-page opinion of Judge Bertin's, more than half of which is really a personal smear and
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
legally founded. Uh, in there, he seems to say that I was the only adverse influence in my ex's life, and that he was having a normal life until he met mean old Nicole. Um, and I'm the one that's being demonized for how this went. I think that that's a gender thing more than anything.
Mhm.
It's interesting to talk to like my male colleagues and friends who have gone through family court because they too see the other side of the coin and they think that they're being dealt the short stick because of their gender.
Mhm.
And I guess it depends on where you are, right?
Mhm.
I am from New Jersey. I'm from New York. I live in New Jersey. In New Jersey, a lot of the times, it's the women who get preferential treatment because they're the mothers.
Mhm.
And so a lot of my male friends and counterparts are like, I have no idea how this happened to you. I have no idea. Because here in Jersey, my wife could have come in still half drunk and she'd be awarded her kids. Like this is, I have no idea what's going on over there. I guess it depends on where you are,
Mhm.
but the fact that family court can be turned on its axis based on the gender of the litigants
Mhm.
is incredible to me. I don't understand that. I don't know if you know this piece, but the Pennsylvania law on custody was rewritten in part by this Judge Bertin, who changed the factors. Previously, Pennsylvania, like many other states, relied on what they call the tender age doctrine,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, okay, you're smiling. I think you might be
Yeah.
familiar with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the tender age doctrine, just for your listeners, generally kids that are 7 and younger are presumed to need their mothers more.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes their mothers would get preferential treatment because that child was of tender age. Think of like a nursing child, right?
Mhm.
And people would be reluctant, courts would be reluctant to remove a nursing baby from their mother.
Mhm.
Um, it was Judge Bertin who decided that the tender age doctrine shouldn't apply and that mothers should not get preferential treatment over fathers. And so this 16-factor test that exists in Pennsylvania now statutorily was born of that tenet. And now there are these 16 things you have to look at. None, they're gender neutral. Nothing is given weight to mother or father or grandparents or anything like that. You have to go each factor and weigh it out. If it worked the way it was intended, I could support it. That would make sense. I think this is more of, taking away an ace card that they thought women had, or at least it's how it worked out in this courtroom. I take great issue with the fact that laws and judges and statutes and orders can be turned based on the gender of any litigant or their family backgrounds or anything that isn't who they are as a parent.
Or their race.
Or their race, yes, or their religion. There's a lot of re-education that has to be done here. If a judge can declare and be corrected on the record and still declare on page 2 of his opinion, still declare that that a Puerto Rican woman is an immigrant. There's a serious re-education that needs to happen here for a lot of things. And to the extent that my profession and the judiciary in Pennsylvania and just about everywhere else is still very male dominated, it is scary to me that this is how mothers are being treated. If there were more judges who were mothers, perhaps it would be a little different because there are nuances they understand that the male judges perhaps don't. But this is still very much a male dominated field. And therefore that re-education is so much more necessary until it levels out.
I just think the whole judiciary needs an overhaul.
Word. Yes.
Because there's cases that I've covered in North Carolina where these, and there are even female judges that are handing the kids over to the abusers. And it's like, they won't even look at the evidence. That's just it. They're not looking at anybody's evidence. They just don't want to. It's there in front of them, but they chose not to look at it. Domestic violence things. It just needs a whole overhaul. I think family court should be abolished. Get rid of it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Some people disagree with me. It's okay.
No, I don't disagree. And thinking about female judges, I have to say I wasn't treated much differently by the female judges in Northampton County. In fact, Judge Roscioli told me to shut up because I didn't know anything about children. I only had 1 and she had 3. And my response was, well, your 3 aren't at issue. My 1 is.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so, eventually she apologized off the record, of course. But yeah, I don't disagree that the family court structure, based on my experience with it now, as it is, it doesn't work.
Right.
It's not working. Right. There's way too much nepotism. There's way too many conflicts of interest. People are in bed together that shouldn't be in bed together. There's a lot of evidence that goes, unheard. People, the fatter the docket gets, the less people want to read it. People are lazy. There's a lot happening that just, it doesn't work. Right. That said, I don't know about abolishing it until we have another better alternative. If you abolish family court and you have parents that are still doing these things that are manipulative and using their kids as pawns, where's your recourse? How do you get your kids back? Right. So this structure, and I don't know, you may have ideas, right? I would, before seeing the entire system, be dismantled, I'd want to know that there is a working system.
Because before family court happened, there was civil. Everyone went into civil and it was handled there. And, and if there was domestic violence things going on, then that should have been in criminal court. That should have been handled there and then go into the civil court. If we're pretending family court just doesn't exist because it's a kangaroo court anyway, and just go into civil court and have a judge that is not biased and just looks at all the facts and handles things the way it should work, it would work.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be opposed to bringing in juries,
Right.
right? Like parenting is not a thing that you do in a vacuum, right? If there are parenting classes, which there are, if you're being forced to go to a co-parenting counselor who theoretically knows better than you, right, on how to parent your child, then that means, right, logic follows that parenting is communal and that you can learn to be a better parent from someone else in the community, which means your methodologies of parenting don't and can't come solely from you. You can be taught by outside influences how to be better.
Mhm.
So why not then invite juries to these cases and let them talk amongst themselves and decide what the solution ought to be, instead of a judge who wrote an antiquated textbook more than 30 years ago and lives by an antiquated mindset, right? It shouldn't be up to one judge and their biases. It should be up to the community, right? We're all in this together, aren't we? Like it
Mhm.
takes a village, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. All right. So it takes a village until it's time to ask that village, for help. Phone a
Mhm.
friend. So
Right.
if there is a conflict in the family unit and there's an issue with a child who's being raised, the members of that village, or either of the villages should come out and hold counsel, right? And I think in Maryland, actually, I think Maryland does this, where family cases are tried by jury. I'd be fine with that. That would be fine. And the jury should be composed of mothers and fathers,
Mhm.
an equal number of men and women, to really look at the story for what it is, the evidence for what it is, and make awards or decisions or settlements accordingly.
Mhm.
We invite a jury for everything else,
Right.
right? There are juries for criminal cases. There have to be juries for criminal cases. There are juries for most civil cases. Why is it that family law is the only thing that has to happen behind closed doors with a
Mhm.
panel of judges and nobody else? It's a big secret. It
Mhm.
shouldn't be a secret how you raise your children, because when you start telling secrets is when abuses start going unpunished. It shouldn't be a secret. No secrets here, right? So since we're spitballing ideas together this
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah.
my 2 cents is, let's make this a jury thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say, just abolish it, take it to civil, and that way you can have a jury, right? In civil court, you can have an option of a jury.
Yep. Yeah.
So and it should be handled in one day. I mean, nothing should be dragged out for 8 months or 2 years or even 5 or
Oh my God.
12. The stories I have heard, it
Yeah.
can be handled
Yeah.
in one day. They can, I was talking to someone in California that, you can handle something in one day. It's that simple. It really is.
That depends on the county. I mean, my attorney was telling me about that, and he's from York County originally.
Mm,
And he said, he's like, look, there are some judges I've had to try cases in front of. You get the first half of the day before lunch. You guys go to lunch. Opposing counsel gets the second half of the day, and you better manage your time accordingly. Because if you needed more time, too bad, so sad. You get what you get. Not bad. I think honestly, both parties should be given their own day. Make it a 2-day trial, 1 day for mom, 1 day for dad,
mhm,
because they each have their own respective witnesses to put on.
mhm,
Uh, but I agree with you. 12 days over the span of 9 months was excessive, and by the way, way out of scope of statutory limits. Anyway, in
mhm.
Pennsylvania, the statute was 100. I think it's 180 days that things have to be resolved in, unless there's an extension that is formalized and put in. Yeah, out the window that went.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, there
oh,
needs to be a lot more oversight of how these judges are conducting these cases, and perhaps maybe even send somebody to observe every now and then.
mhm,
12 days with the judge asking 90% of the questions and calling for speculation. And how do you object? That was the other thing, is here he is asking about my sex life. It's
mhm,
beyond comprehension.
mhm.
And I'm like, elbowing my lawyer in the ribs. I'm like, are we going to object to this? What are we doing? And he's right. He's like, object to what? Object to the judge asking his own question?
No.
How do you even put a stop to what's going on there other than to say, hey, judge, that's a really personal question. Yeah, it is, but I'm the judge and I'm asking it. So answer.
Mhm.
Even if we had put out the objection, all that does is stir his ire and get it overruled.
Mhm.
Right. So there needs to be more oversight in real time. The problem is there is an oversight board. There's a judiciary board that you write complaints to and they would review. The problem is it's reactive,
Mhm.
not proactive, right? You got to go through this whole kangaroo court, as you said. You have to go through this absurd procedure with this judge totally acting out, and then go to the judiciary board and say, hey, look what happened here. And then maybe they'll do something, maybe not.
Mhm.
And in this case, this guy's retired by December anyway. So, I mean, what are they really, they're going to do what? Take him off the bench? Like, what are they going to do? Right. So that's why I think things should be observed and, be managed as they happen, not after they happen.
Mhm.
I think it'd be a lot more efficient that way. And
Yeah,
there'd
I
be a lot
agree.
of justice to go around.
Right.
Yeah. After a while, it doesn't feel like this is about the child at all.
No, no, and who pays for it with these 8 months, 12 months waits? Yeah, the child's paying for it,
Yeah.
and the duress of that targeted parent is paying for it as well.
Right. Right. Is at this point, I am in appellate court. I am still fighting to get her back, but the appellate process will take 6 to 8 months, and it doesn't change anything in the sense of
Mhm.
it will vacate the order. Best case scenario, will vacate the order. Hi, Noodle. Sorry, it's my cat. Well, the order will be vacated, reversed, and remanded essentially.
Mhm.
And maybe, depending on whether they see it as grave of a problem as I see it, maybe I'll get another county, like
Mhm.
another venue, right? I'll definitely get another judge, but another venue.
Mhm.
But all that's going to do is make me play the Hunger Games twice.
Right.
Right? I'm going to go through trial all over again. And that's the best I can hope for. I'm not saying I don't want it. That's what I'm going. That's why I'm appealing. But that all that's going to give me is another trial, and I have to do this all over again. So really, in my mind, I've already written off a year. I've written off at least a year of this crazy schedule where I hardly see my daughter
Mhm.
and her going to this school where I know she could be doing better,
Mhm.
right? And her having this family and dealing with all this. So it's hard because when in my case, my daughter is 7.
Mhm.
By the time the year is up, next summer she'll be 8. And I would have been litigating for her for almost half her lifetime. In the grand scheme of things, when she's 18, when she's off in college, that's going to be a smaller slice of her childhood.
Mhm.
Impactful, I think. I don't think she's ever going to forget it, and the damage is done.
Mhm.
But at this stage of her life, yeah, yeah, we've been litigating for almost half her lifetime. And everybody, instead of seeing this for what it is and fixing it, I'm the one being told, well, why don't you just stop?
Yeah.
Why don't you just stop fighting? Aren't
Mhm.
you tired?
Mhm.
What, what, just accept what it is. Right. And it's being turned on its head.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a mother out there who, knowing that her child is unhappy, knowing that there's a better lifestyle in play for her child, wouldn't go as far as she can go to
Mhm.
give that to her.
Mhm.
Right? To tell a mother who raised that baby to stop fighting for her after 2.5 years of a community shenanigans in court and twisting and turning and maneuvering, to take that child from her.
Mhm.
And then at the end going, well, it happened, so just get over it. Um, I don't see a mother in her right mind, whether it's me or anybody else, accepting that.
Because if you backed down, if you just quit, then later your daughter would come to you and say, "Well, you must not have cared or you would have fought for me." That's what you would hear.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, that's before I even that I didn't get to. That my mind hasn't even gotten there yet.
Mm.
I'm still at, this is my daughter. I
Mhm.
am her mother. You know,
Yeah.
I am a willing, able, accomplished, successful parent with, no criminal or substance use issues or anything like that.
Mhm.
I work from home full time.
Mhm.
Her father does not,
Mhm.
and somehow she's not living with me because a judge decided that his family was wholesome. Right? It just it because it doesn't make sense to me is why I'm fighting it so hard. It would make
Right.
sense if it made more sense, fine. But what kills me is my daughter is has been taken from a home where her mother is home full time
Mhm.
with her and able to provide a lifestyle for her
Mhm.
so that she could be given to her father to have his aunt pretend to be her mother. My duties as her mother have been supplanted by a third party, a
Mhm.
familial third party. And she makes her dinner, she gives her baths, she helps her with homework, she picks her up from activities and school and daycare and things like that. Why though?
Mhm.
Why is that necessary? I could understand if I was never home. I could understand if there was a substance abuse issue with me. I could understand if I was in some way unfit,
Mhm.
but I'm not. And nobody has been able to contend that I am because I'm not. Right? I work full time from my house. I can stop at any point. I can take a meeting at any part of the day, stop it, go get the kid, bring her to horse camp, send her to equestrian riding that she loves going to, or put her on a music lesson, or put her here so that she gets culture while I
Mhm.
finish the
Mhm.
workday and we make dinner together. All of that is completely possible, and they know it is because I testified to it.
Mhm.
And somehow she's been allowed to be supplanted by a third party, as if to pretend that her mother isn't there, as if to pretend she doesn't have a mother. And that's the part that I can't get past. I think what you just said is absolutely true, that my if I stopped now, my daughter would come to me later.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think you're absolutely right. It's just I haven't even gotten there yet.
Oh,
I'm still,
yeah.
I'm still on this part. I haven't even thought about, oh, what would my daughter say? But you're right. That's probably true. She probably would. And that would absolutely destroy me as a
Mhm.
for my daughter to ever believe that I didn't care or that I stopped fighting for her or that I didn't do absolutely everything in my power to
Mhm.
make sure that I made it right for her. That would kill me.
See, like, mine were older. Mine were, like, 14, 15, 15 to 16, they were starting to age out, and, I was lucky. My judge died, okay? And then, they replaced him with they pulled this guy out of retirement. He looked like I swear he looked like 90. I looked up his age, he was actually 70. I'm like, I've heard a lot of bad things about this individual, but, I did tell the kids because they were so happy the judge died, that they wanted to go no, they did. They did
Oh
tell
my
me
God.
that. My son was at his, I think his 16th birthday party, and we were singing happy birthday. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he jumps out of his seat and he yells, I hate my dad's big, fat, ugly attorney, and I'm glad the judge is dead. And I'm thinking, I don't have this on video. My current husband is going, he would, I don't know what he'd say to this. But anyway, I said, well, okay, so he's dead. If you want, I can go to the conciliatory office. And since I was pro se, I can try to get another hearing. Do you want me to? And they said, yes, we want to go on the witness stand. I said, well, you're old enough. I'll give it a shot. That all played out. That the judge, there was no due process. We're fast forwarding into this. Um, the boys were not brought to the courthouse, even though they were subpoenaed, because I told them they were going to be subpoenaed. That's just how you do things. Okay. So they were prepared for that. Um, the judge just said, no, I'm going to continue the previous judge's order. And there was
What?
a couple other things involved, but I don't want to take up the time to explain that. We can do that in another podcast. But when I went to pick up the kids that evening, they said, Mom, was there court today? I said, yeah, where were you? We were wondering where you were. And he said, well, Dad said court was canceled. So this is the games people are playing. And I tried, and I told them, I said, look, I tried. I said, and I had to be honest with them and say, there's so much collusion,
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
I can't continue. I told them I physically can't continue because I had also had a heart attack. I was going to have one that following year, but they understood. They understood that they were aging out too. So, you know,
That's, I mean, at that age, can't they just decide for themselves who they want to see?
they wouldn't let them.
Oh my
They would
God.
not let them because what had happened is that when the first judge was living, they sequestered the middle one, who was the older one, and they came out and twisted his words. He had said he wanted to go back and forth between the houses like we had been doing for 10 years before all of this happened, like when I remarried, right?
Mhm.
That's when all this stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so my lawyer came out and said, the judge just twisted your son's words. I'm thinking, well, did you do anything about this? What's going to happen? And then he just got on a stand and said that he's just going to continue. He's going to give the father the full custody, and this is how it's going to go. And, my attorney said, we're doing everything you've asked. We've jumped. She didn't say we've jumped through all the hoops. What more do you want? And he says, I have my reasons. And she said, well, Your Honor, what are your reasons? And he yelled, I have my reasons. So this is a whole kangaroo court. I have no respect for these people whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they ignored her. They almost treated her, that female attorney, like she was. Yeah, I don't want to get like chauvinistic here because there are good men out there. I don't want to bash all men. I'm not
I'm
bashing.
sure there are. There weren't any in my courtroom, but
No,
yeah,
not
no,
mine
there are.
either. No, I'm
Yeah.
just not mine either.
Yeah, I don't doubt that there are good men out there. And that's the other thing is, just for calling out chauvinism does not mean that I hate men. It's just, I have to say, never in my life or profession has a man ever thrown money at me before.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were having a dispute about payment of fees to the co-parenting counselor who wanted to be paid for time he didn't work.
Mhm.
And opposing counsel in a show of, legal theater came over to my desk and said, you know what, since mom wants to be so petty, and he pulled out $200 bills and physically threw them at me as I sat next to my attorney.
Wow.
I mean, this is, I don't think, or maybe he didn't care, but the aesthetic of that is like, hello, here's a guy who's twice my age walking over to me as the only woman in the room and physically throwing money at me, and nobody said a damn thing. It's like, I mean, my attorney was on his feet. He was, he was very upset.
Mhm.
But I mean, the judge let it slide. So I gotta say, it was the first time in my life. It was the first time in my life a man ever threw money at me, and it was as I sit there holding 2 bar licenses in a courtroom.
Oh my gosh.
It was wild. Well, it was incredibly offensive and incredibly, chauvinistic. It was ugly. So yeah, I have no problem calling out chauvinism in court. I
Mhm.
think there isn't a place for it anymore.
Mhm.
But that might have been a thing back in the past, where when all these guys went to judges school together,
Mhm.
and when they were writing their notes on tablets, and the judges were sitting next to the dinosaurs, whatever it is. But there's no place and time for that anymore.
Right.
And
Right.
so, I honestly think that when you see it, you call it out for what it is, and it's going to piss people off.
Mhm.
Often, it does. Uh, but that's the only way that anybody is going to see what's happening,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
as more and more women break into this profession and enter the profession, and they do it while raising children, there needs to be a decorum
Mhm.
and a foundation of respect
Mhm.
for all the members of the profession and all the litigants here.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly, that this
Mhm.
judge, saw this female attorney and thought that he could give her a what have you.
Mhm.
And it may have been different if you had a male.
Mhm.
Uh, but I don't think that that's right. It doesn't make me a man hater. There are very good men. I've known many in my life. They're very
Mhm.
good men. They're very principled men. My attorney is one of them.
Mhm.
He's one of the most principled men I know. That doesn't mean that it's not rampant in some of these courtrooms, though.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I don't want to suck up your whole day because I could.
It's
But I will have you back on because I'd like to have you back on for updates or if something pops up, how can people reach you if they have any questions or if their case is similar to yours?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me. You can find me on Facebook. I go by my full name, Nicole Suissa, or you can email me at nsuissa 419 at AOL.com. A little old school, kept the AOL address, but please feel free to email me anytime, and visit my page. And if you have questions or if somebody wants to take the story somewhere else or take it public or talk about it more, happy to talk to you.
Okay. Hey, don't jump off, okay?
Yep.
I'm so glad, and I want to thank you again, Attorney Suissa, for coming on and taking time out of your day to talk. I appreciate that.
It's necessary. It's a necessary thing. I know
Yes.
a lot of times we're taught not to,
Mhm.
oh, it could harm your case, or, do you really want to bring this public or what have you? I think we should though. I
Uh,
think we should talk about it. It helps to really help people understand and change the perspectives out there.
Right.
So more of this, please.
More coming. Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Mary Ann Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Attorney Nicole Suissa in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you again, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you.